When the pandemic shutdown hit, that's when I got an inkling that the world of travel was about to change completely. I decided that I was going to make a go of it and become a digital nomad. It seemed like I had found some sort of incredible life hack. I realized that we were not super welcomed by many of the locals. We're sort of going through a country thinking about what we can monetize or commercialize for Instagram. We need to be a bit more conscious about how we travel.
What do you think travelers most misunderstand about the ripple effects of their presence?
You are part of the problem whether you like it or not. It's the mass of travelers. You are part of that mass.
If I want to be an intentionally respectful and reciprocal traveler, what advice would you give me?
Try to tread lightly and leave minimal footprints and try to connect with people and talk to them. Try to learn a little bit of the language. It's important to connect with people just to avoid.
Hello, travelers, and welcome back to Traveling with AAA. I'm your host, Angie Orth. A love for travel is why we're all here, but it's increasingly hard to ignore the flip side of tourism. In some of the world's most visited destinations, the constant stream of guests has become burdensome for local populations. Whether it's rising rents, lack of housing, or just the everyday congestion of foot traffic in places like Venice and Barcelona, it's important to talk about the effect of tourism on the residents living in these iconic places. How do we navigate the rising popularity of bucket list destinations and still do our best to be respectful to local culture and the inhabitants of these coveted places? To help us answer that, I'm excited to introduce you to a fellow journalist today. Daniel Maurer is a James Beard-winning food and travel journalist who has contributed to the New York Times, Eater, and Atlas Obscura. He is also the former editor of Grub Street and author of a new book, The Future of Travel. Welcome to the show, Daniel. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
As people who love to travel and love to experience the world and other cultures and other food, there's also a lot of questions about how do we do that responsibly and kindly and sustainably. So you have a book coming out about this. Tell us, what is your book about?
When the pandemic shutdown hit, I traveled to a town outside of New Orleans called Cutoff, and to sort of shelter in place with a few friends. I will never forget being in the New Orleans airport when it was so empty that the check-in agents at Southwest were playing cornhole in front of their desks. That's when I got an inkling that the world of travel was about to change completely. Like a lot of us during the pandemic, I got used to working outside of the office and, somewhere where it was sunny and nice during the winter. And, maybe going to Austin, Texas one week and then down to Merida, Mexico the next week. And, it was very hard to go back to office life after that. And I decided that I was going to make a go of it and become a digital nomad. It seemed like I had found some sort of incredible life hack. But then in the summer of 2024, I moved to Barcelona and, I started hearing the locals complaining about guiris, which is the Spanish word for, kind of clueless foreigners, English-speaking foreigners. And I realized that we were not, super welcome there by many of the locals. And, I attended a protest of thousands of people in the street protesting against tourists and expats and the tourism industry in Barcelona, which has really sort of taken over the city there. And that is when I realized that, we need to be a bit more conscious about how we travel. I started sort of changing my attitude about travel in general.
We're talking specifically about Barcelona. That seems to be the place that ends up on the news quite a lot.
Barcelona obviously is one of them because of the climate and, for an American, it's fairly cheap to live there. The rent is much lower than in New York, for instance. You're right by the beach, and there's all sorts of attractive things. So many people are coming to these same places, whether it's Mexico City or Barcelona or Amsterdam. And the locals are finding themselves pushed out of housing, which is being turned into Airbnbs. Prices are going up because Americans are used to paying, $6 for a latte, which is unheard of in Spain. And many businesses are kind of changing their nature to cater to these new digital nomads, and locals are very frustrated that their culture is being eroded or threatened.
What do you think travelers most misunderstand about the ripple effects of their presence?
The problem in Barcelona, it's the mass of travelers. And if you come to Barcelona, you are a part of that mass. You are a part of the problem, whether you like it or not. That doesn't mean don't go to Barcelona and enjoy this beautiful city, but it means come there with respect and empathy for what the locals are experiencing, and try to tread lightly, and try to connect with people, and talk to them about what's going on, and try to ease that burden as much as you can.
So, if people don't want to stop exploring and do want to contribute positively to a destination like Barcelona, what are some shifts that they can make to lessen their impact, but still get to have that joy of experiencing a new place?
Obvious advice, but try to learn a little bit of the language. This is something where I think technology can help us, because now with things like ChatGPT, you can have a sort of virtual conversation partner and talk informally with AI and ask it questions about what things you might need to know. Read about the place, not just its history, but the news as well. In Barcelona, for instance, a lot of people come away thinking that the locals are very snobbish or unfriendly because sometimes they'll speak Catalan instead of Spanish. If you read anything about Barcelona and the history of the place, the history of Catalonia, and how the Catalan language was suppressed under the Spanish dictatorship, you'll realize that this is nothing personal. It's they're fiercely proud of this language that was suppressed for decades, and they're doing everything to preserve it, which is great. Be aware of that. If you read the news and you know that Barcelona is in a drought emergency, you might be more likely to take shorter showers at your hotel. If you are aware of these protests, you'll be aware that maybe you shouldn't be one of these tourists who are screaming, singing soccer chants under a window at 2 a.m. The other night, I was going through one of the bar districts in Barcelona, and they handed me a lollipop. It was a group of people who had been commissioned by the city to hand out lollipops that had a shushing cartoon on them, to encourage people to be quiet at night instead of, talking outside of bars and keeping the neighbors awake. So I would also try to not leave waste. Tourists generate a tremendous amount of waste. So, people from Madrid, for instance, are very proud of their tap water. One of the first things they'll tell you is to not buy bottled water, because you don't want to be leaving plastic bottles in all the trash cans. To-go coffee is not really a thing among locals in Spain. If you see a trash can that's full of empty coffee cups, those are tourists that are filling up those trash cans and requiring that the garbage, requiring more garbage service, and which costs money, of course, that comes out of local taxpayers.
So, as these destinations are kind of fighting back against unsustainable tourism and over tourism, some of them have put various things into place to stop that. Like Venice has, I think, a tourist tax now. Japan has etiquette campaigns. So do you see these as deterrents, or do you think they help create a healthier relationship?
Some of these laws are so new that it's hard to say yet whether they're going to be deterrents. I think Barcelona, for instance, they're going to end the licenses for Airbnbs by 2029. That may well deter people who don't want to pay $300 for a hotel, or sleep with 30 people in the same room for a hostel. The etiquette signs are interesting. I was in Kyoto, and they have signs that say not to photograph alleyways, which is not something I ever would have thought not to do. Apparently there have been what have been called geisha stalkers who run around trying to take photos of geishas in the Xi'an entertainment district. It's good to know that you shouldn't, that the locals feel that their privacy is being violated simply if you take a photo of an evocative alleyway. It certainly made me, think twice about doing it. In Japan, there aren't many trash cans on the street. So people have taken to throwing their trash into people's private trash receptacles. And I saw one that had a sign on it that some neighbor had put there saying, if you throw trash here, you will be cursed. The taxes are an interesting thing. $15 tax is not going to deter you from going there, probably. They can be very good for the local population. In Barcelona, for instance, they decided to stop spending their tourist tax on further promoting tourism, and they now put it towards installing very badly needed air conditioning in local schools.
You've talked a bit about how global tourism can make cities feel more similar to one another. What do you mean by that? Are you talking about like Starbucks on every corner?
Yeah, I was in Barcelona the other day, and they had a restaurant where you could order, churros with chocolate is, the traditional snack, but they had churros that you could dip in matcha tea, which is just, and they also had churros that you could dip in gazpacho, which is it's kind of ridiculous. But I didn't try it. Who knows? Maybe it works. But these are the odd things you see. I don't think that it's always a bad thing. I mean, I struggle with this because in the United States, I like eating at Popeyes. I think they make a good chicken sandwich. But there are now over 40 Popeyes in Madrid, and it's they're
40?
very 40 Popeyes, and they're often on very iconic corners. They've taken over historic buildings, and as someone who's been visiting my family in Madrid my whole life, it's kind of shocking to see so many Popeyes there. At the same time, it's one of the few things open at 1 a.m, so it serves its purpose. But I have to say, I don't see many locals, eating there. It seems to be something that's serving purely tourists.
Have you seen any local traditions or any cities in particular kind of fighting back against this homogenization?
Yes, I think Barcelona has, and Amsterdam as well. They have a problem where souvenir shops have taken over the historic centers, and many times they're selling kind of tacky, offensive T-shirts. Both tried to limit the number of these shops, or at least the content that the existing ones have. They have not been entirely successful, but they're trying. One city I went to that has struck a great balance, I think, is Montevideo, Uruguay. And, this is an amazing city with incredible Art Deco architecture, similar to its neighbor, Buenos Aires. It is LGBTQ friendly. It has beautiful beaches. It is, very relaxed. It has all sorts of things going for it. And it's one of the safer places in South America. But somehow it hasn't become overrun with tourists. I think part of that is, and it hasn't been overrun by chains either. There are a few Starbucks, but for instance, the one in the historic center is closed on Sundays because they have strong labor laws. Now, those strong labor laws are probably another reason that you don't see a lot of chains there, because they can't open up and hire cheap labor, and there's strong unionization and all this sort of thing. And they were the first South American country to legalize marijuana, but they don't sell it to tourists. It's illegal to sell it to tourists, so it hasn't become a weed vacation destination like Amsterdam has. During COVID, they had one of the longest border closings in the world. That shows that they were putting the health of their locals over the tourism revenue that they were losing, tourist-oriented businesses that were hurting during that time. But I think you're seeing more and more governments trying to put the wellness of their locals over the revenue that tourism brings in.
It will be interesting to see where that goes over the years. But from the traveler perspective, it all boils down to, it's not so much, are you a traveler or a tourist, but it's, are you a bad visitor or a good visitor? Or are you mindful? If you could design the ideal impact conscious itinerary, what would that include? And probably more importantly, what would it leave out?
I think the main thing that I would advise leaving out is sort of the doing it for the gram,
Sure.
looking at things through the lens of Instagrammability. It causes problems. There are countries like Italy and Japan that have put up sort of selfie anti-selfie walls to discourage people from, there was a spot where everyone was taking photos of Mount Fuji, and it was causing traffic problems. But I think the bigger issue is, how it affects us when we're sort of going through a country, thinking about what we can monetize or commercialize for Instagram. One thing that I would also recommend is if you decide that you want to see Colombia, for instance, when I had a full-time office job, I had a week to see Colombia, and I figured I'm going to see Bogota, Medellin, and Cartagena in this week. And of course, I think part of that is we all want bragging rights, and we all want to feel well traveled and to be able to say that we went to these places. But you end up just hustling from one place to the other. You're not sleeping well because you're traveling the whole time. You're leaving a lot of impact on the environment with these flights. And what for? I mean, you're not really connecting with the place. And when someone asks you, "Oh, you went to Bogota and Medellin, which one did you like better?" "I'm going to Colombia." You can't really answer because they're both kind of the same. They're both kind of a blur in your mind, and you didn't really experience as you should have, connecting with people and kind of living life there. But
Yeah.
so I would definitely recommend against that kind of hustle and bustle tourism.
Let's talk about technology in general. Now that AI is on the scene helping people plan their trips, how do you think tech is going to affect the future of travel?
I think tech can obviously be very useful, but you should be careful how you use it. I mean, I've definitely used ChatGPT, for instance, and other AIs when planning trips. I lived in New York for a long time, but just to see what it would tell me where to go in New York, I asked it, for a good recommend restaurant in New York, and it sent me to Carmine's Italian restaurant in Times Square. It is one of the most touristy places in New York. It is not the type of place where you'd want to go if you're looking for a sort of authentic New York experience. But and ChatGPT and those bots do tend to send people to the same places. So don't be surprised if you end up waiting in line with 50 other people who got the same recommendation from the same chatbot. But it can be useful as far as just sort of conversationally asking questions about which neighborhood should I stay in, which this and that. The questions that guidebooks have traditionally answered, you can now sort of interact with more in the sense that you can have a conversation with it and ask it follow-up questions. So it's useful, but and then of course we have increasing powers of translation. We have the Ray-Ban Meta glasses. I actually have tried those, and right now the translation is very crude, and I wouldn't try to have a complicated conversation with it, but it does help a little bit. And it is easy to imagine a future in which they've refined the technology to where you could be wearing these glasses and be interacting with someone who speaks another language, and having their words translated as they speak. And I think that's a good thing, because connection is really where many times technology threatens to prevent that connection. For instance, I have found myself many times, asking ChatGPT or just Googling for a good bar to go to. And then when I get to that bar or restaurant, I'm sitting there looking for the next one to go to. And, you're just kind of scrolling through your phone at the bar instead of enjoying where you are. The much better option, of course, is to talk to the bartender and ask him or her where the next best place to go to is. Maybe he'll talk to the patrons, and the patron will get into a fight with another patron about, no, this place is great, that place is great. And all of a sudden you've made 5 friends, and maybe you stay at the place where you are because it's, because you have new friends in this strange city. So I think you want to be careful that technology isn't interfering in your experience of a place, and that it's augmenting it instead of replacing it.
Technology can be great, but I think that's a great point, that it could detach you from what is the essence of traveling, which is connecting with people in other places.
Right.
So, how do we embrace that without losing the romance of travel?
At least when you're using the Ray-Ban meta glasses to talk to someone, you're talking to someone. You're using the technology to connect with someone instead of using it to avoid talking to someone. I don't want to ask directions, so I'm going to just look at Google Maps. That can be
Yeah.
convenient, but sometimes it's nice to ask someone for directions and hey, can you tell me how to get to this restaurant? And they'll tell you, oh, you don't want to go to that restaurant. That place is, that's a chain that's, exploiting their workers or whatnot. And
Yeah.
you'll get into a conversation with them. The other day, I was sitting on a bench in Barcelona, and someone walked up to the guy next to me and asked, "Where's a good restaurant around here, like a McDonald's?" And the guy who he had asked said, "Well, you don't want to go to McDonald's. McDonald's are everywhere." And I didn't hear what restaurant he ended up recommending, but I'm assuming it was a better option than McDonald's.
I think there's a time and a place to visit a McDonald's when you're out of town. Sometimes, after you've been traveling for a while, all you want is a taste of home. And if that's Popeyes, listen, I'm down for Popeyes on the road, but you miss out if all you do is go to stuff you can get at home, right? Like that's when you miss I don't know, the reverence and the beauty of it. So that's my next question. What advice do you have for travelers who want to experience a place with reverence rather than extraction?
And just kind of try to move through a place as you would your normal everyday life and enjoy it as you would. I remember an instance where I was at the Alhambra and in Granada, and I was just kind of walking around, and someone who was trying to take a photo of the tile work just kind of shooed me out of her photo. It was a very, I can't imagine doing that to someone in any sort of everyday situation. But, for some reason that photo was so important to her that, kind of manner thrown by the wayside. But, this is how people become when they get sort of acquisitional about travel, try to learn about it as much as possible instead of looking at things on a very superficial level.
So I've been reading through your book and it comes out in December. Am I right?
Yes.
It's called The Future of Travel, and it explores the good, bad, and ugly of modern tourism. And I feel like we've talked quite a lot about sort of the uglier side of it, but I think the book is hopeful. So, what is it that gives you optimism about the future of travel and how it's evolving?
Well, I think a lot more people are going to get to experience travel in the future. There are rising middle classes in India and China and Brazil and other countries, and that will also have an impact on the places they're traveling to. But I think that one of the things we forget about when we talk about travel is immigration. And, I think immigration in general makes cities much more diverse and dynamic and interesting. As someone who has lived in both Argentina and Spain, it's very interesting to me that there's been a huge uptick in Argentinians living in Spain. There's Argentinians opening restaurants, and there's Argentinian musicians that play at the local neighborhood festivals. And there's a community there that's very strong and vibrant. It's something that I think we should celebrate.
Do you think in future generations, the people who come after us, do you think they're going to travel much differently than we do?
Presumably, I mean, I think that one encouraging thing is that you do see governments and you do see airlines and cruise operators making an effort to use more sustainable to transition to sustainable energy and renewable energy. The European Union, for instance, has been very strong on this, saying that airlines need to use alternate fuels and cruise ships need to use alternate fuels by such and such a year, such and such a date. And you do see these cruise companies making an effort to step up to that. So, hopefully there'll be less of a dilemma when we get on an airplane about, how much we're damaging the environment, for instance. That's many years away, but I'm hopeful that things can keep going in that direction.
From your book, I gather that Anthony Bourdain is a person you have followed and someone whose ethos you admire. How has his kind of travel philosophy on food and conversation, how has that shaped your beliefs?
I definitely think that by connecting with locals, you can learn more about a culture and, avoid misconceptions or stereotypes. I was at a restaurant in Argentina once, and there's a guy next to me who had a bottle of wine, and he offered me some wine. And I figured, okay, why not? And we started talking. He asked me where I was from. I said New York, and he said New York was his favorite city in the world, although he had never been there, because you could smoke anywhere. Like you could, I had to inform him that New York was the first place to enact a smoking ban, and that in fact, what he was doing right there, which was smoking at the sidewalk cafe, would be illegal in New York. So, I like to think that he learned to appreciate his city a little bit more,
Right.
instead of idealizing mine. That I think, is helpful and kind of helps people understand each other better. I went to Bordeaux, France for the first time recently. And, of course, the French have a reputation for being snobby and not very welcoming to visitors. And, this trip was completely the opposite. I guess the French people also liked Brooklyn quite a lot. So when you would tell them that you were from New York, they would, start chatting you up. And one guy invited me and my friend who I was with into his apartment, and shared some wine with us, and we became friends. Another guy invited us to a sort of members only social club, that was definitely not in any guidebooks. A bartender, the owner of a bar, gifted us a bottle of wine from his family's vineyard. And, they told us about all these places. Oh, go to this place and ask for my friend. And, all of a sudden we had all these friends in France. I think like any other place, New Yorkers, you have people who are, fed up with tourists, and you have people who are very welcoming to them. It's like any other place in the world. So it's important to connect with people just to avoid falling into that stereotyping and assumptions.
Traveling is so much richer when you're making new friends along the way, and even more so when your new friends are gifting you wine from their family vineyards. If you want more responsible, respectful traveler tips from Daniel, he'll be back in our next episode to share his top 5 ways to support local economies as a tourist. Daniel Maurer, thank you for joining us, and thank you, our listeners, for being with us. If you're planning a trip, be sure to connect with a AAA travel advisor. Check out AAA.com/travel or visit your local branch. This podcast is a production of Auto Club Enterprises. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave us a review. I'm Angie Orth. Thank you for traveling with AAA.